leader who's out of the country. You have another political leader who makes it about himself. And you have the other political leader who's just not doing his job. They've contained 0% of this fire, and it didn't need to be this way. This man cannot manage water or forests. Did you know they've had record rainfall, and he hasn't built a single reservoir? Hasn't broken ground in a single reservoir. It rains in California and just washes into the ocean. He is bragging about tearing dams down. He tore more dams down than anybody in the history of this country, because the Native Americans told him to do it, because it would save some salmon. Now look at this. A couple of years ago, Donald Trump issued an order to send water from Northern California to Southern California, and Gavin Newsom sued Donald Trump to block it. Why? Because of smelt, Dana.
Yep.
It's the size of my pinky, this fish. It's supposedly an endangered species. No one really knows what it's there for. No one really cares. And you know what just happened? There's no water coming out of the fire hydrant because this man mismanages the water there. And then it turns out last month, you know what? Biden and Newsom decided, we don't need to protect the smelt after all. Yep. The whole thing was worthless. And then you get...
He's right in a way. It's mismanagement, because during the time of them getting all the rains was during the time that it was growing all the foliage. And now it dried up, the foliage died, and now you got a tinderbox. In the meantime, they could have went ahead and tried to have saved some of that water, but instead, like he said, they just let it run right off into the ocean. Listen to some more of the stuff he's got to say about this.
To these forests. He hasn't built any of these roads that are used to escape. You basically have Pacific Palisades, and you guys know this. You're in a cocoon surrounded by state parks, and you're blocked by the ocean. There's one way in and there's one way out. It's a death trap. He hasn't built a single escape road. So these people are just going to cook. And he doesn't do any controlled burns. This whole time, barely does any of it. Has cut money for forests. They spend more money on homeless than they have on fires. And both of them are out of control. And then there's Karen Bass. She was invited to an inauguration for an African president and she left. Why is an American politician going to some other politician in another country's inauguration? That doesn't make any sense to me. You can say no sometimes. This whole thing is a disaster. It's criminal what's happening right there. And you pay so many damn taxes in that state. They should be able to serve the public.
You know this area well. You spent some time there.
Yeah, I lived there for a year, but I'm mainly a Northern California guy. Every place has something weird. California is like dating a supermodel. Beautiful to look at, but whoa. But Jesse, you were right that it's 0% contained, but CNN points out it's mostly contained. I'm glad Joe became a great grandfather. It's nice that he actually acknowledged the child. Good for him. I think it's actually worse than it looks. People are sending me videos of my buddies in LA and stuff, and it's insane. PCH, it looks like a Cormac McCarthy novel, you know, and I think, you know, if you have spare room or any space in your home, you might consider opening them up, because I agree with Harold. I think this is going to get worse. There's going to be a lot of people with nowhere to go. They're not going to be celebrities either that can go stay at the Beverly, you know, the Beverly Hilton. Beverly Hilton. What do I know? I stay at the Red Roof Inn. But it's I think you're going to have a lot of displacement. This looks like it's going to be, I don't know, months, years, billions and billions of dollars. Will people rebuild? Will they even have insurance to rebuild? I mean, it's a pretty, and I hate commenting on how this happened while it's happening. So I won't.
But we're going to have time to do that in the coming days. I know that we want to tease, but I just want to ask Kennedy one thing, because Jonathan said something this morning on Newsroom that has been with me. There's a lot of people in California are wealthy, yes, but a lot of people that live in these areas are not. And they've lost their homes too.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of the people who moved to Pacific Palisades that, you know, my girls have grown up with, they moved there because there are public schools where their kids are safe. And so they moved to the Palisades into apartment complexes and condominium complexes, or, they rent homes. A lot of people who live there inherited homes from grandparents, and they went to Palisades High School, and it's very family and community oriented. And not everyone there, the majority of the people that we knew, the parents in public school, they were hardworking families who were sacrificing everything to send their kids to schools when they couldn't afford private schools. And those are the kind of people that got dropped by companies like State Farm, who just dropped a ton of people in this area who, thought they might get around to getting fire insurance. And now they've lost everything. I have a good friend who's a single mom, and she doesn't know if her home is standing. A neighbor across the street lost his home. He called her today and said, "I don't think your home is still there." That's literally all she has. She's a photographer. She left her home with her cameras and some baby pictures, and that's all she's got now. So.
And the schools have both, all those schools in Palisades have burned down.
Yes, village school, the high school.
This is one of the biggest natural disasters I certainly have been a part of in terms of the coverage, and we are praying for everybody. We'll have more to come as California battles these raging wildfires and disturbing reports that water is starting to run out. But also coming up, President-elect Trump is on Capitol Hill as he plots GOP unity and MAGA global expansion. We'll talk about it next.
I just wanna love somebody.
And what we have is we have
to be responsible citizens and heed the advice of our first responders.
The images are inconceivable, and I wonder if you've had an opportunity, because of the ongoing nature of the disaster, to assess all the damages and tell us about them.
I'm going to weigh in on what they're talking about here pertaining to the California fires that just broke out. I guess it was January the 6th is whenever it broke out. I'm thinking like about 24 hours ago, and it had really done some devastating because the winds was blowing so high. I just have trouble wrapping my head around the fact that so many of these forest rangers, foresters that work for the forestry, basically has let this go to the degree of what they have. And I don't know if anybody put out any alerts or not pertaining to it being super, super dry. But if they didn't, they should have had, is all I got to say. I've lived out in Thousand Oaks for a while. I didn't stay there but maybe about 3 or 4 months. But I lived there long enough to know that I didn't want no part of it, especially whenever I wound up one weekend. I thought that I was going to spread my wings a little bit and go downtown. Boy, oh boy, what a mistake that was. On the way down to LA, I wound up picking up a hitchhiker. Of course, at that time in the 80s, it's pretty predominant for anybody to pick up hitchhikers back then, because you didn't have to worry about people basically shooting you and killing you just because you parked too close to them or looked at them the wrong way. In other words, society was a lot different in the early 80s. And I picked up this hitchhiker, and he talked me into going to this high rise. Had no idea. I still to this day don't remember the name of it. I just know that they had valet parking, and I thought that was crazy to be able to hand somebody your keys and then park your vehicle for you. But anyways, we went up in this high rise, and I'm thinking it was probably maybe 30 floors high or something like that. I don't even know for sure what floor that I was on. I just know that they had some fabulous smoking weed or hash or whatever what it was, that basically I got so stoned that I basically fell out, passed out in the living room, and then wake up to about 9 or 10 o'clock the next morning. Well, whenever I woke up the next morning, there was this Oriental guy that was in the kitchen cooking. He had pots and pans going, and there was all kinds of smells in the air. And man, he was wearing a white robe, and looked like a professional chef, may have been. I never get to know him that well. Because I got to noticing people going in and out of a particular room, and sometimes there'd be one girl, sometimes there'd be two or three girls, sometimes it'd be one guy, sometimes it'd be two or three guys. Usually they was coming out to get them something to drink or go to the bathroom, and then they'd go right back into that same room. And my curiosity kind of got the best of me, and I thought, I wonder what they're doing. I walked over there where the room was and opened up the door. And this was, like I said, this was, I think in 82. I may have my years a little bit off, but I'm pretty sure it was 82. And whenever I opened up the door, there was these, probably give or take about 30 people that it was in this big, huge room. And they all had telephones, and they all had their own little seats to sit in. And they was calling people. It was a talk board services. And you can hear them talking. You've called people before and you've heard them talking in the background. Well, that's what these people was. And they was scam artists. They was basically playing a Yankee Doodle Dandy type watch that played this music. And they would call people up at random and tell them that they'd won this watch, but they needed to send it to so-and-so to their address. And they'd play this music and really get the victim all hyped up about, wow, I ain't never heard that before. And that's coming out of a watch. Oh, right, really? I'd like to have that. And next thing you know, they disperse some critical information to them. And the next thing you know, somebody goes in and busts into their accounts. Well, I didn't much like what I was looking at, but I didn't really say a whole lot. I hung around there till dinner, our lunch, and it was a fabulous lunch. I mean, it was something that probably you'd pay at that time in the 80s, probably $50 a meal for in downtown Atlanta. And they invited me to go up to the top. They said that they had a penthouse up there with a swimming pool. Come on up. Sure enough, whenever I go up there on top, you could see all LA from down below. This particular hotel was probably one of the highest at that time. It was pretty close to being the highest. And sure enough, they had a swimming pool. They had a jacuzzi. And I got to watching some of the most beautifulest people in the world was coming over there. And basically skinny dipping in the pool and in the stuff up there. And I guess this was natural. And this was in the early 80s. You keep in mind, I was raised up in Cydonia Hop in Tennessee all my life. And other than traveling around towards being in construction, going to Mississippi, going to Missouri, going to Nashville, going to other places out of town. Usually they set us up in a hotel, cheap rate hotel. I've never been nowhere. And whenever I got to putting two and two together, towards the drugs, towards the Yankee Doodle Dandy, and the beautiful women, and what was going on up there, I snuck out of that thing, and I got back into my room, and I got out of there as quickly as I could, because something gave me a haunting feeling about what that I was being exposed to, because these was completely total strangers. The guy was still there that I'd picked up hitchhiking, but of course he was already involved with the mob to begin with. So I snuck out as soon as I could and never turned back, and went back to Thousand Oaks. And it seems like I told Tom about it or something. He said it's 1,000 Wonders you didn't wind up getting killed. And this was in the 80s. I mean, since then we've seen the Rodney King deal happen up there in LA. And we've seen some other horrible events that happen out in California. And the thing about the forestry division, they should be trained by now of knowing that they have massive wildfires. Just like the electrical company. They should be trained by now of knowing that once those winds gets up a certain speed, odds are you're going to have some busted, broken down power lines. Power lines, whenever they fall, they hit the ground, they create a spark. They should have some sort of warning devices on each one of those towers that hold those big lines up, to where if the speed of the wind gets up a certain amount, that it send off a signal, and the next thing you know, they shut down the power on that particular area until it smooths back up. In other words, they should monitor the wind out there, I think, this is my thoughts, the same way as we monitor the temperature in our oceans. And why they can't do that, or why they aren't doing that, I don't know. But if you really think about it, that's what they claim anyways. What caused the Hawaiian fires was a line. It was very, very windy. I mean, extremely windy. Of course, it was extremely dry. A line come down, created a fire. Firemen put it out, or thought that they did, left. 2 hours later, it set back again. And whenever it set back the second time, it come back in a vengeance, and it done what it done to Hawaii. I still haven't ever got a true death count and all the people that got killed out there. Of course, then again, I still ain't got a true death count of all the people that died in the flooding in eastern Tennessee, North Carolina, and part of Georgia and Florida. I don't know if the media just don't care anymore about the velocity of the death, or what the deal is, but I still haven't never found out. But this is awful. This is absolutely, and as I've said before, and I'll say again, every time a catastrophe happens, and it don't matter if it's a man-made catastrophe like President Putin over in Russia, or Hamas, or whoever over in the Middle East, every time a catastrophe happens, it dwindles. It diminishes the resources in that area. And you may say, well, in a way, it's a good thing, then it puts people back to work, right? Well, maybe not. It depends on if they got insurance, number one. Number two, how high is it going to cost to replace that home? Because lumber and everything else is skyrocketed to be able to build a house. And it just puts a strain on everything. Puts a strain on everything and everybody, because now you're probably going to have, I'm going to say, if 1,000 structures that already done been burnt, of course, probably a third of those are probably businesses. But let's say 750 structures already done been burnt. The average person, I'm going to say times 2. So you're looking at 1,500 people right now. That's basically homeless. That had a nice home to go live in, and now they don't. Where are you going to put them people? Where are them people going to live? They're going to live out on the streets. Every time there is a natural catastrophe or a man-made catastrophe, it drains and dwindles the resources.
Well, the damages from the Eaton fire, the Palisades fire is horrifically awful. The Eaton fire, which is by us, is almost equally as terrible. So many structures, so many businesses. In the Palisades, some of the news information that we're watching is, the entire community's been wiped out. So that's very tragic. So right now we are in our small community. We have been somewhat, fortunate. We haven't had any major damage. A lot of trees down and things like that, but our structures are still intact. So we're very grateful for that. But the devastation from the Eaton fire, which is again just next door, is tremendously awful, and it's going to take many, many years to rebuild.
Right.
Shamir will stay on the story, and if there's any information we can help you get out to your constituents, we are here. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And of course, some places won't build back.
We'll have much more on the devastating wildfires in Los Angeles. A fifth fire has now erupted. All of the fires are reported to be right now 0% contained. We'll also talk about the health impacts they're having on millions in the area because of that dangerous air quality we've been talking about. Deadline White House continues after a quick break. Don't go anywhere. To you, tell me what that means to people who call Pacific Palisades home.
I was just saying to Bianca, who's out here producing all the work that I'm doing, that right down this street, I'll just show you. Come and take a look this way. There's a veterinarian's office that my parents were animal people and had a lot of dogs over the course of my childhood. That was our vet, you know. The vet is gone. Around the corner down there, that was my pediatrician's office, Nicole, on the corner over there. If you make a right-hand turn, there's a restaurant, or was one, Cafe Vita, and next to that was the Chinese restaurant, Cafe Palisades, and next to that was the local Starbucks. On the other side of the street was the Noah's Bagels. I could close my eyes and I could walk around here and I could tell you everything about this community. And
We lost you for a second, but not before you made me cry. I invented a word since I've been on the air, the rehumanization. You know, our politics and a lot of the things and stories you and I cover together require.
And now it's unrecognizable. It's incomprehensible that something like this could happen. But it can happen right here in Northwest Tennessee. Or an earthquake. Or a catastrophe pertaining to an outbreak. A pandemic, anything.
Require the dehumanization of people in our communities. And there's a gift you've given us today in something that's obviously a really painful story for you. It is sort of the rehumanization of our neighbors. I mean, there aren't Democrats and Republicans losing their communities. There are neighbors and friends and moms and dads and kids who've lost their vet's office and their pediatrician's office and their schools and their churches and their homes. And I'm so grateful to you.
Their whole livelihoods has been turned upside down. And we just don't see this just in one area, in one particular event. But we've been watching this now again and again and again, being ravaged by the works of the devil. Satan coming down in great wrath.
And really, the gift of bringing this community that you love so much to life is something that we are all grateful to you for, Jacob. Thank you so much. Please stay safe.
thank you so much. And just really briefly, if I could say, there's a lot of people who come and work and support the people who live in these communities and the homes and the businesses that keep them open. They're not the residents, but they're the people from other parts of Los Angeles, maybe not as affluent or not as in the spotlight. But Pacific Palisades doesn't just run on Palisadians, it runs on Angelinos, people from all over the city that come here and make it what it is. I hope everybody can hold a little something in their heart for all those people tonight too, because this is a community that's as much theirs as it is the people that lay their head here at night.
Jacob Siroff, is only you can do. Thank you so much for deepening our understanding of this story that everyone's covering, but no one's covering just like you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to turn to something Jacob and others have talked about, and that is this major health issue facing millions of people living in and around the LA area. All this smoke and soot and ash. Jacob talked about the cloud above him, so dark it looks like nighttime. It's suddenly kicked up into the atmosphere since the fire began. It is creating an air quality crisis emergency in the surrounding area. Authorities are recommending people in parts of Los Angeles County, including Malibu, take measures to protect themselves because such poor air quality can have an effect on anyone breathing it in, especially people who are very, very young, very old, or pregnant, or with any other underlying conditions. Joining us on that is global health policy expert, MSNBC medical contributor, Dr. Vin Gupta. Dr. Gupta, Jacob had his mask on. He said he took it off because the wind shifted. It made me nervous, but I trust he's taking the advice of the experts on the ground. Tell us what people in and around Los Angeles affected by the fires and near them need to know today.
Yeah, of course. I mean, a very moving segment is just catching that with you and Jacob. So first of all, just thank you for sharing that and for letting Jacob share how meaningful all of this is really to him from a personal standpoint. And it affected me just listening to that. To the matter at hand, though, from a health standpoint, there's things that every one of your viewers, especially in the LA County area, but frankly, given this world that we live in, Nicole, need to keep in mind. Smoke is a reality for most of the country now, but especially now in Southern California. So I want to divide into a few things, but acutely, if you are facing flames as we speak in some form, if you're next to close to a fire, often what happens, and this gets underplayed, is that acute smoke exposure, Nicole, far away from flames, can be as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than the flames themselves. And so when it comes to fires, more deaths actually occur because of smoke exposure than because of heat from, say, a flame. And so it's important one to keep that in mind. If you're near a fire and can't evacuate, can't get out, which is number one, get out if you can.
Right.
Go and get as low as you possibly can. Critical to do that. Get low to the ground because smoke rises to the top. So if you're in an enclosed space, you can't open up a window, try to get to the door, but do so by getting as low to the ground as possible because smoke rises to the ceiling. So that's number one. Number two, just for everybody to make sure, especially if you have family members that might be in harm's way, are less mobile. This is a safety issue, of course, especially as we're aging, less mobility. We have to be thinking about how do we evacuate people safely. But again, smoke exposure can cause rapid incapacitation. That's the worry, is exposure to carbon monoxide. And, we often hear about people getting exposed to carbon monoxide, say, in a garage if their car, for example, wasn't turned off and the entire home is exposed to carbon monoxide.
Right.
But this is something that's really critical. Carbon monoxide binds to key cells in your blood, and they actually take up oxygen, or they displace oxygen. You rapidly become altered, dizzy. So that's the concern here, is incapacitation even from a few minutes of smoke exposure. So that's the acute piece. For those with, say, asthma, you had mentioned young people. I'd also add in anybody that's pregnant. We know just a few minutes of exposure to wildfire smoke, Nicole, recently, as some data showed, can actually harm your developing baby's immune system for years afterwards. So that's something to keep in mind, and especially those with pre-existing conditions. What can you do to keep your home safe? First of all, stay indoors. I think Jacob's point, this is not a time to be outside. Close your windows, close your doors. I'd recommend even putting heavy-duty tape on your windows where they meet actually the frame of the window, so you can really minimize even particles disseminating into your ambient in-home environment. Try to use an air purifier. Many of us have air purifiers over the last 5 years. We've purchased them. If you don't have one, you can do a DIY air filter where you get a box fan and have a MERV 13 filter right next to it. So you can jerry-rig one if possible, or if you have one already, try to run it around the clock. And especially for everybody in Southern California, if you have air conditioning, that's something you want to make sure you're running continuously, because not only does it make it a cooler environment, it actually is actively filtering the air around you. So those are things you can do for your ambient environment, number one. Number two, I would just quickly say to Jacob's point, and to all the firefighters out there, to all the first responders, I've seen a lot of folks wear respirators, N95 masks that you and I have talked about many, many times. That's good. That blocks out that particulate black soot from entering your lungs, which we know is devastating to human health. The thing we have to keep in mind, though, Nicole, is it actually does not prevent you from inhaling volatile gases and toxic gases that are very common in wildfire smoke. That's where you want something like a gas mask. And so that's a critical PPE for, frankly, reporters on the ground like Jacob, and also for firefighters. I've seen a lot of images out there of firefighters not wearing anything. We want to make sure they have the right PPE, something to keep in mind. Gas masks is ideal versus a respirator, i.e. an N95 mask that blocks soot, but it does not block toxic gases from getting breathed in.
And I imagine with what Jacob described as a huge fire in the middle of an urban area, that's a real danger for all the first responders and reporters on the ground. Dr. Gupta, thank you so much for joining us. We'll continue to call on you in the coming days. We're going to switch gears a little bit around here. Coming up next for us, we'll turn to another big story just days before a crisis in California that underscores the importance of accurate information and facts, something we spoke to the FEMA administrator about. Social media giant Meta all but guts any effort to even try to root out disinformation from its platform. We'll bring you that story next.
Sad. Super, super sad.
To see the people going in to help. And when I think about our neighborhood, I think about Fire Station 69 and all of the firefighters that we knew that held bake sales and toy drives.
Visiting T.
Enough of allowing people to pour over our border. Enough of when we arrest them, just letting them right back out and not deporting them. I mean, my goodness, Liz, in New York, there's been 58,000 illegal immigrants arrested and convicted of crimes who've been allowed to stay. We just saw one of the most heinous murders in recent memory where an illegal lit a woman on fire. We need to secure our border.
Yeah, we got breaking news. Thank you, Joe. President Trump, we're showing a live shot. Sorry, Joe. President Trump now arriving inside the Capitol. You see the president now walking with First Lady Melania Trump. There's a lot of excitement happening right now, Joe Gamaldi. Thank you for joining us. We're staying on this breaking news. President Trump, he's meeting with top GOP senators to talk about rapidly enacting the Trump agenda. He is now speaking now. Let's take a listen.
And we'll see you in a little while.
He's going to move quickly, get the Senate to move quickly on his agenda. We're going to stay on this story. It's happening right now. Trump is on Capitol Hill. Let's listen to this news.
Well, I like one big, beautiful bill, and I always have, I always will. But if two is more certain, it does go a little bit quicker.
Okay, breaking news. President Trump just arrived on Capitol Hill. He's talking to Senate Republican leadership to move the Trump agenda rapidly. We're on this top of the situation, but first, we got this story.
We don't need their cars. I'd rather make them in Detroit. We don't need their lumber. We don't need their dairy products. We have more than they have. We don't need anything. So why are we losing $200 billion a year and more to protect Canada?
That was President Trump questioning why do American taxpayers have to spend hundreds of billions of dollars every year to protect Canada. They've blown out their government health care budget, but basically not doing a lot of military spending. Now, former far-left Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, he's out of office. He resigned. He's now getting ripped on Twitter and social media for trying to attack President Trump. Jason Rantz is going to react to what Trudeau had to say. Stay right there. We're going to be right back. We got a lot of news coming in.
I'm sure all the things that President Trump and his team will find when they
Own home. It's helped with the swelling and the pain.
In real time in California should demonstrate the urgent need, the necessity for all outlets, all disseminators of information to want to disseminate clear, correct, accurate truths. Lives literally depend on it right now as we have this conversation in Los Angeles. And yet, it's always a but, the largest social media platform in the world went the other direction this week. Decided, F it. They turned away from any attempt to have a platform that showcases accurate information and even pretends to hold themselves accountable for disseminating accurate, factual information. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg announced yesterday that his company was doing away with all efforts at fact-checking on its platforms of Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. Keep that in mind if you're on any of those platforms. They said, again, screw it, we're done. We're out of the truth and fact business. Instead, they're going to turn to something called Community Notes. It's the model that the platform currently known as Twitter, now Elon Musk's X, has used to basically turn that platform into a dumpster fire of disinformation. Mark Zuckerberg and his deputies saying the system they had been using resulted in, quote, too many mistakes and too much censorship. As to why the change is happening right now, listen to how they put it.
The recent elections also feel like a cultural tipping point towards once again prioritizing speech. So we're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms.
Meta recently elevated former White House Deputy Chief of Staff to President George W. Bush, Joel Kaplan, to be its global policy chief. He went on Fox and Friends yesterday to echo his boss's praise of, quote, free expression and the incoming Trump administration. And on Monday, Meta appointed this man to its board of directors. If you don't recognize him, his name is Dana White. He's the UFC CEO. He happens to be a close friend of Donald Trump. And if all of that doesn't have you worried enough, Zuckerberg also said that Meta will be moving its content review team from the state of California to the state of Texas to, quote, help remove the concern that biased employees are overly censoring content, end quote. Joining our conversation, President of Media Matters for America, Angelo Carusone, is back, and Professor of History at New York University, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, is here. Ruth, I start with you.
Yes, well, if you want to please Donald Trump, you will do two things, which Mark Zuckerberg is doing. You will give money, lots of it, to Donald Trump, and he's donating $1 million to the inauguration. And you will also create an environment that allows Trump and MAGA and his allies lies and claims and half-truths to more easily circulate. And it is really striking that in his speech, Zuckerberg said that it's fact-checking that's created a lack of trust, which is very Orwellian because, of course, it's disinformation. The purpose of disinformation is to break trust among people and turn them against each other and cause people to not know what to believe, and so they're more dependent on the leader. And maybe the only trust that was broken was, Trump's trust in Zuckerberg when he was, actually upholding authenticity and upholding objectivity through fact checking. And so now Zuckerberg has moved to take that obstacle away to him being treated well by Trump, which seems to be his main objective.
Angelo,
I didn't realize.
So many people purchase Medicare supplement insurance plans.
I've always known that there was gullible people in the world.
Whatever it is, doesn't matter. We're going to get the result.
I mean, some people, you can tell them almost anything, and they'll believe it. And it don't matter if it makes any sense or not. Just because they heard it, they believe it. But since social media has come into play,
eventually work its way across.
I've never seen so many people that was so vulnerable as far as being gullible. And I thought, maybe these people was halfway educated and they know a little bit about stuff that was going on in the world, but apparently none of them hardly know nothing. I mean, some of them don't even have enough sense to be able to change a flat. They don't. These younger kids can't even don't even know their times table. Can't even do correct change in their head. I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer by far, but I've never thought that our country would become this displacent towards being this divided. And it is.
South. OKC, we're talking 1 to 3 inches. Now, of course, this is all dependent on how fast we can cool the surface. The temperatures right now, not really hovering close to freezing. We're above freezing in a lot of these places, and that goes for the surface temperatures as well. Dallas, you're sitting at 40 right now. So yes, you're feeling the chill, but we need it to be colder, below 32 degrees or 32 degrees or below on the surface to really get that snow to start to accumulate. And it does take about 1 inch of snow to cool the surface by 10 degrees. Now, if we get more sleet, it takes about a half an inch of sleet to cool the surface by 10 degrees.
Showing right here at 31 degrees. That's what he's showing. And tonight's supposed to get 17. Tomorrow's supposed to be 38. Feel like a warm front. See what I'm saying? I don't know.
Interesting.
To a meeting with top Senate GOP leadership on getting his agenda rapidly enacted. Shut the border, enact his tax cuts for all Americans and more. Congressman Jeff Van
people to leave now. Let's bring meteorologist Chad Myers. Chad, tell us what's going on with the forecast.
There are still more fire starts going on right now. Most of them are very small. They start out at 5, 10, 20 acres. But with the wind, they can grow very, very quickly. And look at what's happened now to the power customers without power. 1.5 million. So right up on top of the trails, on top of the mountains, yes, we had those wind gusts. They were 100 miles per hour. The gusts came from the desert. The desert got cold last night. And when a hot air balloon goes up, it's because it's hot. When the desert gets cold, the air sinks. When the air sinks, it hits the ground. It can't go any farther, has to go somewhere, and it goes out through the canyons. And this is why the wind picks up in Southern California at night. Doesn't do it anyplace else. Middle of Nebraska, the sun sets and the wind stops, but not here in Southern California. So now we're up to well over 25,000 acres that are already burning, and that's why it's so spread out. Winds are calming down, and they will continue to do that.
I'm going to end it right here. You know, I tried to warn people about these electrical disturbances, massive electrical disturbances coming. Obviously, people was more interested in trying to put me in the category of being a monster, like I was going to create the electrical disturbances. So there's really not much more that I can say or do other than to pray for these people, pray for the situations all over the world, because it's obvious that we're continuously being hammered and battered again and again and again towards being ravaged. And like I said a while ago, every time this happens, it diminishes the resources. Good luck to all of us, and shalom.